What's up YouTube, and welcome to another Procreate tutorial where today I'm going to show you how you can create this silhouette design using the provided palette and canvas size that is available over on my Patreon, completely free for everybody, so check out the link to that in the description down below. And the one thing I'd love you to do is if you could support the channel by subscribing for weekly Procreate tutorials, I'd greatly appreciate it. But if you want to go a step further, you can always go ahead and join me over on Patreon, where I've got a catalogue of over 100 exclusive tutorials that are only available to Patreon supporters. Again, I'll leave a link to that in the description down below. Enjoy today's tutorial and let's get started. So once you've created your canvas, the first thing we'll do is go up to our actions. We're going to add a drawing guide. So we're going to turn that on under the canvas tab there. We'll edit the drawing guide to whatever is a quarter of your canvas size. So if you used a 2000 by 2000, set it to 500 and we're good to go. And then hit done. And as always, we're using that to lay out against scale, and where I lay things out, you can use my grid against your grid to sort of work out where things are on the screen rather than sort of guesstimate. So let's move on in straight away. Let's go to the background color. Let's change it to the color bottom right of the palette and hit done. And then we're going to use the empty layer here. We're going to go to our colors and grab the pink in the middle of the far right column. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to change it to airbrushing and the soft brush. But it's set to a really large size. That's far too large. Let's go to about 25% there. We're going to go left to right at the bottom, really firm. You may need to zoom out like I have. Going to go left to right, and then as you make your way up into this second row here, you might want to make the brush size a bit bigger, about 33%, and just lightly left to right, just creating a beautiful gradient in your sky. So you're kind of going up to there, but you want to start that transition from the blue into the pink. Lovely stuff. Let's then go ahead, and I'm going to put it on separate layers so we can adjust it afterwards if needs be. So I'm creating a new layer. I'm going to go to my orange tone, top right of the palette, and we're going to run this in the middle. And this is going to run right at the very bottom here. And then as we make our way up towards the pink, we're just going to start to go left to right really lightly and just feather out the orange there. So we get a lovely gradient. And then we're going to go ahead and create another new layer. We're going to go back to our colors and grab the middle of the far right column. And starting at the bottom, we're going to press nice and firm, and then we're making our way into the middle of that last row there. So the row that we were working with the orange. You should end up with a lovely bit of color there. You can just make your way up towards the orange a little bit more if you want and just really fade that out. And then it's up to you. You can go back into any layer now. You can grab the pink, for example, if you want to. Maybe move that up a tiny bit at the back. You can then likewise move the orange up as well. This is the benefit sometimes of separating your layers, just so you've got some more flexibility if you want to make some adjustments, especially with a gradient. But once you're happy, just go up to your layers and just simply pinch all three of them together to create your background. Let's then create a new layer. Go to our colors and grab the color in the bottom left of the palette. Let's go to our brush. We're going to use calligraphy and we're going to change it to the monoline brush. And your size doesn't really matter. I'm just going to set it nice and large for you, around about 35%. And we're going to draw a circle in the middle of our screen like so. Hold your pen down and pop one finger on the screen to make a nice perfect circle. Scale it up like so, and then drag and drop your color in. That's really important. Then you go to your cursor. Make sure snapping is turned on in the bottom left, and we drag this to the middle, and you should be able to hit that orange line, which we know we can see anyway from our canvas that it's in the center. And then it's up to you. You can maybe make your sun a little bit lower than halfway. So these blue nodes here are a little bit lower than that halfway point. On that layer, we're going to go ahead and tap on it and add a mask to it. Really simple, don't be put off if you've never used them before. We've added a mask and it's attached itself to the layer, and then the whole mask is set to white. You'll notice your color has also changed to black, and we want it to. If it hasn't, just double tap at the bottom of the disc here. If you double tap anywhere in the disc on the edges, it will automatically snap to the full area of that. So left, right, up, down, etc. So with your color set to black, go back to your brush, back to airbrushing and the soft brush. And we can go ahead and go left to right through our sun there, just fading out the bottom of it, creating a lovely gradient of the color, just fading it into the background. Let's then go ahead and create some clouds. So we're going to go to our layers. We will create a new layer. We'll keep the same color. So we should have this color here, bottom left of the palette. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to the option of, I like to use the option of calligraphy and the script brush. If I tap on the script brush, just so you can see my stabilization, you can see there's a little bit in there as well. So it just irons out a few bumps and lumps, but we can purposely add some more in if we need to. And then starting at the top, we'll add in a fairly large cloud. So we're going to come across here nice and round. I'm more sort of focusing on the top area of my cloud and then letting that run out. And then I can go ahead and just run through the bottom with a more sort of horizontal line and then fill in the gap So varying amounts of pressure there to create a cloud, and then just allow sort of the end here maybe just to run out all the way across your sky. I love those ones where you get a lovely long trail. You can then attach another one underneath it if you can sort of squeeze that in. Now the bottom of your cloud will get erased and masked just the same way as the sun did, so try to bear that in mind. Likewise with your spacing, and as you start to make your way further down, of course you want to start to think about making your clouds a little smaller. So I'm just going to create another one here, and let's try and create a nice sort of thin taper on the end there. And I'm going to put another one over here. Now in a minute I'm going to duplicate all of this and then just put it down in the corner here. So if I put another cloud here, for example, a nice small one, we can duplicate this layer and save ourselves some work, or you can go ahead and fill in your entire sky however you wish. A lovely little cloud there too. Then we want to go ahead and just grab your eraser, tap on your eraser and have it set to airbrushing and the soft brush. Let's bring that size down to around about 8%, and then just run your pen horizontally along the bottom of your cloud like so, just to fade that out. We're going to fade out the bottom of this one too, and of course the large one, to maybe make your brush size a bit bigger. Be careful of course of the one just below it, you don't want to out of that one. Just running that along there like so. Now we're going to go ahead and go to the layer, tap on it and change its blend mode to the option of soft light. It just makes it a little bit more faint against the colors in the sky. And you can swipe it to the left if you want to and duplicate it. Grab your cursor, flip it horizontally, but simply because we've gone up to the edge here and right to the side here. So if I flip it horizontally and bring it down, we can then use uniform and scale it down and add some really distant clouds as well. So you can scale it down to like here and just position that up against the side of the canvas. If you get anything that you think looks a little bit funny, you can always go ahead and grab your brush and maybe just draw in the top of that cloud again, you know, nice big rounded shape if needs be. So you can always correct. The only thing we want to somewhat avoid is, I want to avoid clouds running in front of the sun, so I'll grab my eraser and I'm just going to round that off and just give our sun a little bit of space to live. And you can duplicate that and put it on the opposite side as well if you wish. I'm going to leave it for the minute. I'm trying to avoid using too much symmetry in my work at the moment. Next up, we're going to draw the land in the distance. So we'll go to our layers. If you're done with your cloud work, you can pinch the two layers together and save yourself a layer. So let's go ahead and create a new layer. Let's go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here. It is the fourth color on that top row. We're going to go to our brush and make sure again it's calligraphy and the script brush. By the way, the size is set to 32%, but it's pressure sensitive. So if you start off really light, you can press firm if needs be to get a much larger shape. Now we're going to draw along this row here pretty much and draw some hills in the distance. Now it's critical you remember that they are in the distance because we don't want to add in too much detail to them. You want your hills in the real far points of your landscapes to be really minimal. You don't want to add in too much sort of detail on them. They're so far away, you shouldn't be too interested. Now as long as you go edge to edge, left to right, drag and drop your color in, and then go back to your eraser and start erasing from the bottom as well. So about 13% to start with, just to get a good solid sort of takeaway of that color. And then we're looking to get right up against there, but leaving the solid blue along the top. So just get up against there, take away some color in certain areas. Maybe you can just whip your pen up and into some of there, just to make sure it's not sort of a horizontal line, a little bit wobbly. And then we repeat that for the next layer. So we create a new layer. We go to our colors and grab the next color. So it's the third color on that top row. We'll then go ahead and grab our brush, still the script brush, and we're going to go ahead and draw this one in front. Now, because it's in front, you can do certain things. You can sort of come across from here and sort of go in front of that shape. Likewise, I could raise this up a tiny bit more here. But of course, you want to have gaps that are a little bit sort of lower, just to show that there's a difference between the two areas of land. So we can drag and drop our color in again, and then we can grab our eraser and we'll go ahead and erase from the bottom once again. Nice and firm to start with, and then just lightly make your way up towards those peaks, getting rid of some color, but leaving the majority of the peak there. And if you want to, you can always go around in a circular motion and kind of make your way up into there if you want. Let's then go ahead and create another new layer. We'll go to our colors and grab then the second color on that top row. Brush, same brush, and then we draw in another tier. And of course, things are getting a little bit closer now. So now you can start to exaggerate some peaks if you want to. And we don't really want to go much lower than sort of there, really. You can put a little marker if you want. So I can go ahead and just draw in a large sort of peak here now if I like, just to sort of really show the difference in the land. It's a lot closer to us. And I can maybe draw in another one that sort of makes its way a little bit higher and then off to the right hand side. And again, drag and drop your colour in. And then from there, you can always grab your eraser and blend out from the bottom. Get rid of the majority and then just fade that out at the bottom. Fading that out. Look how close I'm getting to some of these little mini peaks here. Really taking away some colour from them. They're getting really faint. And there we go, we've got some nice rolling hills in the background. Next up, it's time to move to our main silhouettes that are going to sit at the front. So we're going to go ahead, and if you want to, you can pinch your rolling hills together, or you can swipe from left to right on all three and group them. And then you can just call that hills. You can collapse the group down using the arrow on the right hand side, and then that just makes things look a little bit tidier. So let's create a new layer in front. We'll go to our colors. We'll grab the second color on the second row. We're then going to grab our selection tool. We're going to use the option of rectangle, and we're going to make sure color fill is turned on so it turns blue like so. And then we're going to draw in our fence. So we're going to drag a line across the screen like so. So this is going to be one of the horizontal beams, of course. So across the screen to around about here. You can always adjust it afterwards. Tap on your selection tool when you're done. Then we're going to go to our layers and create another new layer. And this is going to be one of the main posts that we're going to create. So it wants to be a little bit wider. So we're going to go to our selection. We're going to make sure rectangle and color fill is turned on. And we're just going to draw in a rectangle like so. I want to make these ones a little bit wider than what we're going to introduce in between. So a little something like that. Tap on your selection tool when you're done. Now for me, I just need to grab my cursor in freeform and just make this a little bit taller than what it was. You can see the height against the fence in the background, so roughly around about here. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab freehand and make sure color fill is turned off. We're going to zoom in on this, and we're just going to sort of start here. I'm going to tap in the very middle here, and then I'm going to tap parallel to that on the right hand side, or as best we can, it doesn't really matter. And then go round the outside, tap on your dot to make that selection, grab your eraser, and you should have a massive large soft airbrush. Just press really firm and you'll get rid of that, and you'll create the little point on top of the fence. Now from there we can go ahead and then create another sort of vertical pole. So we'll create a new layer. We'll go to our selection tool and again use rectangle and color fill turned on. We'll zoom in and we're going to go ahead and create another piece of wood here. So we'll make this a little bit skinnier than what the other one was, and then tap on your selection tool when you're done. Now what we're going to quickly do is we're going to duplicate this multiple times to create a main pole and then the sort of sub poles, and then we'll merge them into one layer and then create the whole fence from there. So it's important that we then move this into position to start with. So a nice sort of gap in between, a little something like that. Maybe be a bit more daring and make it a bit thinner. Tap on your selection tool when you're done. Then go to your layer, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor, move it to the right hand side, and then you want to create an equal gap in between. So whatever you create now, we want to make sure we duplicate. Now with that said, we then also want to represent this gap in between here as well. So we'll grab both layers by swiping from left to right. So it's both vertical poles, and just move them across. Move them across. And once we get to there, that looks about right. There we go, we've got a lovely gap. Then let's go ahead and we can go and merge these two together, so we can pinch them together. We can swipe to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor and move it across, and then making sure again the gap in between now is representative of those ones. And then we'll go ahead and do that one more time. So swipe that to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor, move it across, and there we go. We should now have a nice formation of our fence. Now we can go ahead and pinch all of the vertical lines together, so they're all onto one layer now, you can see from here. Then what we'll do is we'll grab our cursor and we'll move this across to the left hand side, so somewhere over here, making sure we touch the bottom of the canvas. Then go to your layer, swipe it to the left and duplicate that, and then grab that, move it across. And again, as long as you make sure the gap here is equal, you can tap on your cursor when you're done. And then we can create our fence all the way across. So you can duplicate it again, move it across, tap on your cursor when you're done, and keep going until you fill out the design. So duplicate it, grab your cursor, move it across. There we go. And you may end up with a little bit of a gap. That's perfectly fine. Just swipe it to the left again, duplicate, grab your cursor, and just again, as long as you make sure the gap is correct, the rest will take care of itself. Now, of course, I've got a gap on the left-hand side, so I need to go ahead and go to my layer, one where I've got the whole design on, swipe it to the left and duplicate it, grab my cursor and just move that all the way over here. And again, make sure that that gap is equal. There we go, we've got our fence. And we've got some different positioning as well of our poles, which is where our birds are going to sit. I didn't want things, again, to be too symmetrical. Now, when you're done, you can pinch all of your fence together, including the horizontal bar as well. And there you go, you've got your fence. We can then go ahead and start adding in additional details. So different sort of silhouettes. Now, I'm going to create different layers for each silhouette. So I'm going to create a new layer for a moment. Swipe from left to right on the fence and group them together. And then we'll just call this silhouettes. There we go. And then on the empty layer above, I'm going to go ahead and draw in some land. So I'm going to go back to my brush, tap on my brush and make sure it's still calligraphy and the script brush. And I'm going to add in some land here that gets rid of this like massive void of sort of space here. So I want this to sort of come across, make its way in between there, and then like sort of a little mound maybe, and then really raise up again on the right hand side. And again, as long as you go edge to edge, you should be able to then drag and drop your color in. And then what we're also going to do is introduce trees as well, and we can always amend this space afterwards. Give yourself some more space than you think you need, but also, you know, get in there and create bumps and lumps, maybe even sort of rectangular shapes of maybe a rock of some sort, whatever you want to create. Now, as I mentioned, we are going to draw trees in, and I want to do that first. So we're going to go to our layers again. I'm going to create a new layer. I'm still using the script brush, and we're just going to draw in some very simple trees. I want it to sort of come from outside to around about here. So this middle point of our design is where I'm going to sort of start to bring in a sort of main tree, and then I'm going to bring that in and then let that go off to the left. Notice how my pressure is starting to get a little bit thinner as I make my way up. As I come into the scene here, I'm going to also go ahead and then try to draw in another branch, like quite a main branch really, and let that run all the way off. We want that beautiful thin taper on the end of our design. Now, once we've done that, we can then start to work in additional branches. So let's go ahead and sort of work in another one that maybe is a little bit sort of more horizontal and then comes across like so. And then I'll sprout one out from here as well. Create one that goes across. Little ripples here and there will look great. And then you can sprout out another one. I would urge you to sort of keep it fairly simple if you can. So I'm just going to come along there. And then once we've got sort of a basic structure, you can now introduce smaller elements such as like little mini shoots coming off. And again, we're looking for these very, very thin tapers. We're going to come down here. I'm just going to thicken out the body a bit more. And then maybe another very thin taper off there as well. And another thing we're going to do is introduce some leaves. Now, I find it a little bit easier to press quite firm on the outside. So starting off on the outside, you know, light to heavy and then light again to create a leaf. So light pressure, heavy pressure in the middle, and then thin line there to draw in a leaf. It doesn't even have to connect sometimes. You can just have, you know, sort of very, very thin elements that we don't even get a silhouette from them. And again, I can just maybe introduce like a small shoot off of there too. But thin line, heavy pressure if you want to, and then a thin taper. It's up to you whichever way is easier, going from the actual branch outwards or going outside inwards. And try and vary it if you can. You know, a couple going in either direction will look fantastic because you'll get variety in your shapes and your pressures. I just find it a little bit easier to do it that way in certain spaces. Really very cool. It's very fun on this part now. You can have some fun just adding leaves to your tree. Light, heavy, light. That's all you need to remember with your pressure. Try and take a look though for the rest of your design and make sure you're not adding in sort of leaves that are, you know, far too large compared to the rest of them. This is a very sort of naked tree really. We're not adding in too much here. We are maybe in a sort of autumn time maybe. We've got a lovely sunset in the autumn time. Things are looking a little bit less packed. And then also don't be afraid to just introduce like a really thin, small sort of sub branch really. And then again, add more leaves onto there too. Everybody's will look different. Yours will look different to mine. It's a very interesting practice in pressure as well, like gauging the pressure of how much you're adding onto the screen. So have fun with it. Test yourself at the same time. And let's see what else we can come up with. I've got lots of branches there that I want to slowly start to sort of flush out a little bit more. But for a minute, I'm going to move up towards the top part. So this part of the design will take a little bit of time, a little bit of patience. And I'm not going to skip ahead necessarily because I like to do a lot of it all together and show you what I'm sort of working towards. I'm creating lots of little curves in there. Make sure I'm zooming out constantly just to see the overall impression. I want leaves going from random directions as well. I want some that are not necessarily sort of facing upwards. They can sort of have a little bit more of a downward face to them. And then maybe I'll create like a very thin branch here. Some very small shoots off of there. So they don't even have very much of a sort of curl to them or anything. They're very, very small shoots, and allow your branch to maybe run all the way off to the edge of the screen. It just continues on the story beyond what we can see. I always really like that. Let's see if I can introduce some branches, even some naked branches. You don't have to introduce leaves everywhere, maybe just one on the end potentially. It's totally up to you. Make sure you zoom out, take a look at your whole scene. Also notice how I'm not trying to add anything, especially here and here where our birds are going to sit. So we want to sort of leave that space a little bit more empty. You can run a branch in from the outside of your scene. You know, maybe it comes off from another one out there, and then introduce some leaves on there too. Lovely. And it'll nicely just sort of fill out if you take your time with it. A couple on the end there. Again, I can spend a long, long time. So if I can, you can too. Spending a long time just flushing out your tree. It's fun though. And again, as I said before, great practice for pressure sensitivity. I know some people can struggle with it, but you can always test yourself. That's always the best thing. Maybe I'll run like a branch out from here, maybe thicken that up a tiny bit so I can have some little elements getting a little bit closer towards the sun. It's flushing itself out nicely. I think I could definitely introduce like another branch sort of making its way through there. The one thing you want to make sure is you always have that main runner of your trunk area of your tree. So you always go ahead and make sure that that's nice and strong in the center. You can identify that main trunk, and then the rest all of course are just sprouting out from there. Let's make sure we add in like little bumps and lumps though to some of the branches. That will also look good. It will give it some nice age and, you know, contorting shapes to it. Lovely. And that's looking pretty good. I think I'm going to go ahead and just leave that for a minute because we do have to replicate this on the opposite side. So starting over here, I'm going to go ahead and sort of bring in a main sort of branch that I know is going to come into a little bit of a skinnier tree. So it's going to run down into here. And then from there, I'm going to sort of run up, and I might even redo that line. Let's go up again and then curve that round over to the right hand side. Maybe another little shoot off at the top here. And then as this gets up towards here, maybe I sort of branch that out. So I've sort of really set out my entire design for this tree very early on, giving myself a good blueprint, as I like to say, a good blueprint to add in all of my leaves to. So I'm going to do exactly that now. I'm going to add in my leaves, little curly lines into all of these lovely little branches. So sometimes you can create like very small little sort of stems as well. So thin line then into really heavy, thin line, really heavy. So you can see some of those start with a very, very thin line, and that was all done in the one motion. And don't worry if some of your leaves look a little bit almost like blob-like. It's just the way that the angle of how we're seeing the tree maybe, and so the angle that we're seeing it from. So it doesn't need to be a certain way always. You don't have to have that very stereotypical leaf view to it. You can have some nice diddy ones in there if you want to. Nice little tiny ones on there. And then maybe we branch out some additional larger ones from there. And maybe one right on the tip as well. That would look really nice. There we go. That's cool. What else can we do? Can we just introduce another one off the side here? Just a very small one. Again, it's not meant to be something super realistic in a sense. We're just having some fun, creating a fun silhouette design. Doesn't need to be anything too deep. So once you've got something like this, maybe another little sort of shoot coming off of here, and then maybe a little small one on the end, and a couple off of there too. Just to add in some extra details. That's cool. Maybe I'll even grab my eraser. This is something you can do. I always keep things like this in the video. I'm going to sort of go to about here, and then I'm going to reintroduce this, but from a little bit more of a curved angle. There we go. So it's really coming in from the side of the actual design, and you can just make a rapid decision like that and just move things around completely. Let's then move into another little bit of kind of greenery. Let's create another new layer. I'm creating new layers in case I want to separate things. I'm going to add in some vines that are going to run and twist their way through the fence. So I'm going to start over here, wiggle my pen along, and then try and sort of create loops almost, where I can then run that through there, run that round, and then maybe even off to here as well. Just like a little detail or something like that, and then maybe that sort of sprouts out from here, and really light with your pressure as you get towards the end of the vine. And then in there, add in like little sort of leaves sort of shooting off from here. There we go, tiny little details. I wouldn't sort of pack that in necessarily. Like if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit. Likewise, I could maybe sort of bring in something here, a little leaf off of there. Don't force it if it doesn't fit. Like I said, it doesn't need to. Let's then introduce some plants across the floor. We'll create another new layer. The first thing I want to do though is make sure we consider the fact that we have to add in some grass, so leave some gaps. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and simply from this point here, press really firm and just keep flicking my pen outwards with hard pressure, ideally at the beginning, and then thin pressure at the end. It doesn't matter if it doesn't necessarily do that. You can block in the center of it, and then we're just going to create this bush with lots and lots of sprouted out leaves of whatever sort of species of plant this is. It doesn't really matter, as long as you then maybe introduce some like sort of downward facing ones, you'll create curves. So I'm just sort of adding in like a couple that just float a little bit lower down, and then the ones at the top, they're really going for the sun. And then if you get any tiny gaps, I urge you to just fill them in. That way you can just make sure that the silhouette is nice and solid, and you end up with a plant just hiding in behind there. And then what we can also do is create another new layer. I'm going to go to my brushes. I'm going to go to artistic and use the Aurora brush. I'm going to make sure the opacity is set to 100%, and I'm going to go round in a circle over here. Now notice the Aurora also has like different tones in there. We're going to replace that in a minute. I just want to make sure we create like a bush over here using the Aurora brush to create some very small leaves, etc., like bush-like shape to this, and the odd, making sure there's lots of thin ones on the end. And then just go ahead and go to the layer. First of all, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. And then pinch them together just so we can make sure the opacities are nice and strong. Then tap on the layer, alpha lock it, tap on it and fill it solidly with the color, and then tap on it and turn off the alpha lock. And your bush now should sit there nicely as well. As I mentioned, we've got some grass to create, so we can create another new layer. We can go to our brush again. We can go back into the option of, let's go back into, calligraphy. And the script brush, let's grab our script brush down here, and let's make sure we add in some leaves, some grass down here, and we want that to kind of shoot all the way along. So just create grass down here in behind this fence all the way down. You can create some by the poles here, like so. Adding in some nice grass. Just flick out from the bottom, tends to be the easiest way. And you can just really take away that solidness of the ground, introducing some fun grassy shapes. Lovely. And that grass has got a little bit wild. No one's been trimming it for a while, so there's the odd little stray one there that's nice and large. And then maybe you can have like literally like one or two that just sort of sprout out from there. You can show how nice and wild it is behind there. And then the only thing I want to then do is just go back to my tree layer. Now I've added in the grass, so I've gone to the tree layer that's of course got the tree there. I just want to go ahead and just sort of bring the land up towards this tree a bit more and kind of close this off on the left hand side. I want to somewhat frame our design, so just add in and getting rid of a gap there, and then this one over here, maybe I could sort of get rid of a tiny bit over there too, just to try and block in our design a bit more. It's now time to, though, add in our birds, and they're going to be a little bit easier than you think to create. So we're going to go ahead and go in our silhouettes. We'll create a new layer. We're going to go to our brush and we're going to go to calligraphy, and we're going to use the monoline brush. I'm going to set the monoline to something fairly small, around about 5%, and we're going to get started by creating some ovals in here. So we're going to start here. We're going to draw this one in, hold your pen at the end so it's a nice perfect shape. You want to sort of tip that one up towards sort of the top there, so a little bit heavier towards the top. Then we're going to go to our layers and create another new layer. We'll then draw in a circle that's going to sit directly on the top there. So we'll draw in a circle, and we will pop a finger on the screen to make sure it's a nice perfect circle, a little something like this. And then from there, just use this layer that we're working on right now. We're then going to go ahead and set the brush size to as small as we can, down to our 1%. You're going to sort of draw outwards to create a bit of a beak, like so. You can then create like a bit of a sort of bulge here at the front of the face, so a little extra little bump sticking out like so. And then it's as simple as then curving your lines here to curve the neck and the head into each other like so. So you're creating this type of shape. And then we can go to our layer. We can pinch those two shapes together. We can then drag and drop the color in and hit continue filling, and then just fill in all the gaps like so. That's your bird body done. Now, if you want to, you can also go to your eraser and tap on your eraser and use calligraphy and the monoline brush again. You can set that to a very small size and start to maybe refine this if you want. So you could sort of round that off a bit more, sharpen that up if you feel it's necessary. You know, you may want to sharpen that up. Zoom out though and make sure you look at what you had initially, but something like that. Then go ahead and go back to your brush and go back to the option of script. And we're going to add in some wings that are just going to come down from the back. And we're just going to go down here and we're going to press somewhat firm to start with and then just allow that to sort of taper out. Now you may need to do this a couple of times and maybe at different paces. That one's not too bad. That gives me some fairly large wings. They might be a little bit too big. So let's maybe sort of do that again. And then once you get to something like this, you can then draw in another one that kind of sits underneath it. So you want to make sure it's a little bit thinner than the one previously. I'm really happy with how that looks. That's fine with me. And then I'm just going to grab my cursor and just move my bird a little bit higher until it sits just here. We've got a little tiny gap. We're not going to draw any feet. We're just going to simply just draw in the curve of an illusion of some feet. Nothing sort of too detailed. So just a little something like that. So it looks like it's just sat on top of there. And if you want to, you could always zoom in here, get really small with your brush, maybe down to a 4%, and maybe just create like some sort of flick off here on the back of the head of some feather-like design. So a little something like that. And then you can go ahead and just grab that bird, swipe it to the left and duplicate it. Grab your cursor, flip it horizontally and move it over onto the opposite one. Maybe they're lovers that have just found each other for the first time. You can either use uniform and make it a little bit smaller, but then you might want to make that one a bit bigger. So it's up to you. I'm going to make this one a tiny bit smaller and stick it on the very top there. And then I'm going to go ahead and make the other one a tiny bit bigger. So I'll just grab my cursor and make that a tiny bit bigger. And make sure it's right on the very top of our little fence there. Now at this point you want to take a look at your design and try and sort of work out a few things for balance. So what I mean by balance is just trying to take a look, is the piece sort of set in a way that we have some good elements on the right hand side, likewise left hand side and so on. So this bush for example, I might want to grab that layer, swipe it to the left and duplicate it and then grab my cursor. I can move it across, I could make it really small and flip it horizontally and maybe just sort of fill that space out a bit down here as well. That kind of gives me a little bit more balance. I could probably arguably go to my tree as well. If I go back to my script brush on the tree over here, I think this area over here could probably do with maybe a little bit of a hanging additional branch here. So nice and thin and let that sort of run back into the tree, but then maybe a smaller one that just comes down here and then just some small leaves just coming off of here maybe. Just to try and balance out the piece. Sometimes it can, you know, look a little bit sort of lopsided, and obviously our birds are not in the center as well. That's on purpose. We don't necessarily have to have everything in the center, but by all means you could always move things around if you want to. If I pinch with two fingers and we go full screen with 4, we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed this silhouette design. As always, make sure to tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, Facebook, or anywhere else that you want to share your work with me. I'm pretty much everywhere. And of course, if you want to get even more tutorials from me, you can come and join me over on Patreon, where I also post 3 more exclusive tutorials every single month to my Patreon supporters, where if you decide to come and support me over there, not only do you get access to a catalogue of over 100 tutorials that are exclusive to patrons, you get early access, sneak peeks, and much more. So come and check that out using the link in the description down below. And if you like this video here on YouTube, you'll love this one on the screen now. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.